when I was so sick, I thought I had a thought and then an act. It was like simultaneous. And then I'm like, I can have a thought, first of all, not act on it, sit with it and let it go. Like, so to build that, sense of self that you're able to do that is really, really powerful.
Welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast. I'm Jonathan, and I'm here to help you end 24/7 food thoughts, binge eating, and actually enjoy life with food. This episode is for educational and informational purposes only, not to be substituted for medical or personalized advice. Check the link in the description for my recovery resources, and let's get straight to the episode. So, welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast, and in this episode, I have Meredith O'Brien. But I just like to ask you, Meredith, as a good introduction, if you were at a party and someone asked what you did, what would you respond?
A great question, Jonathan. I would say that I help find food freedom for people. I help them create a bigger life through an intuitive and freeing relationship with body weight and shape and food.
And suppose I'm that person at the party, and I said, "Oh, what does food freedom mean?"
Yes, I know. It's a really big question. I think food freedom is about being able to connect with our inner signals and going back to our authentic, healthy core selves that, gives us a lot of information, and being able to find pleasure in food again, to find, satiation and satisfaction, and to really get away from all the different rules that the diet culture, unfortunately, share with us. And there's such a different way of living where we can feel tremendously nourished and, strong in our relationship.
Really important to enjoy foods, but to stay tremendously nourished, like you said. And
Yes.
and before the start of this podcast, you're showing me about your book very briefly. Would you want to talk about?
Yes. Yeah, so I very excitingly published my memoir. It's called Opening the Door, My Journey Through Anorexia to Full Recovery. I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was age 12. And when I was at age 35, I went into a treatment program. So I actually talk a little bit about my childhood, my life with an eating disorder, going into recovery as a middle-aged woman, and then really life after my recovery. And it's completely personal. It's really raw. I put my whole heart into it. But really, I really wrote it to inspire other people, to bring hope, and to also tell people what eating disorders really are. Because there's a lot of myths out there and stereotypes, and I want to break all of them and to be able to say this is what my journey was like, and also to give the message that full recovery is possible.
Oh, that's amazing. And do you feel? I'm sure you must be really proud to pour your heart and soul, basically your life, something you're really proud of, not just the book, but your recovery story into the book.
It really, I'm extremely proud. I still when I look at my book, I still can't believe I kind of wrote it. And I was like, I wrote every word in there, crazy. But it really is something I'm the most proud of. And I continue to work with my clients. They talk about how difficult it is and how uncomfortable it is. And I have been there, and I appreciate that, as well as the recovery can bring on such pride and such being just being able to create a different relationship with ourselves and other people. I truly believe a lot of times with eating disorders, if it's binge eating or other eating disorders, that there's so much disconnection and numbness. And so part of recovery is learning how to connect with ourselves, our internal wisdom, and then also connect to other people, which can be really scary. But at the end of the day, we're human beings and we want to have a sense of belonging. And a way for us to do that is to help us to have a better relationship with our body weight and shape, to be able to connect with other people.
Wow, that's really good insight into it.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a bit more about where the title Opening the Doors came from.
That's a great question. I was going back and forth in terms of, what to name my book. It's literally opening the door, because what I was at my sickest of my recovery, I would actually close my door, lock my door. I would pull the shades down and I wouldn't leave the house. So it got so, terrible that I was so disconnected from other people. And I remember at different parts of my journey, I started opening the door. Like sometimes I remember opening the door to a neighbor. Then I opened the door to the Girl Scouts who are selling cookies. And throughout my book, there is this going back to this literal of opening the door, but really what it is opening my life to a bigger life and connection. And that's why I named it Opening the Door.
Wow, that's a thing. So you mentioned that you struggled with anorexia like when you're really, really young. Like, was it 12, let's say?
Yeah, I was 12 years old. And it started at such a young age. My parents didn't understand it. They were very concerned, but kind of came from a place of anger. Like, I don't get this, because back then there wasn't a lot of research. But for me, I felt my emotions pretty strongly. I definitely experienced anxiety and depression as a young girl, and I really didn't know what to do with it. And so for me, the illusion of control over my food intake and a restriction, seemed to kind of protect me in that way when I was younger. And then unfortunately, it continued for a really long time. And until really I got to the place where I was like sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I wanted my life to change. And so I really paused work and I went into a treatment facility for 6 months. And then I continued with treatment afterwards. And, each day I say it's my full-time job was for me to, nourish my body and be able to reframe my eating disorder thoughts and be able to come out on the other side.
And so how did this all start? Like, what was there a moment that triggered like the eating disorder, or tell us more about how it all started when you're really young?
Yeah. So when I was really young, I really believe that I have like the genetics. We also say like what causes an eating disorder. There's so many different factors. And I think I was just blessed with those genes that from a young age, I definitely had a form of OCD. I liked everything to be color coded and, everything was neat and in order and things like that. And I think I just continued that with my food. I would all of a sudden only want to eat unsalted pretzels. And that's the only thing I would let myself eat. So it started as like very weird kind of eating rituals. And then I also experienced this sort of kind of opiate kind of high when I was restricting. So for some of us, which is so hard, it's a brain disorder. But when we are restricting, we actually feel really good. So we're like, wait a second, now I have to do something that doesn't make me feel really good to continue to live my life. So I started that, as a young girl, and I don't think anything particularly. I guess what I would say is that I was an athlete. I was an Irish step dancer, and so there was a lot of emphasis on body and weight, and I think that I got a lot of praise for people when I started to shrink my body. And I think for me, wanting people to like me and to fit in, that I kind of used that as, oh, if I change my body, people will like me more. And then unfortunately, I developed a serious eating disorder.
Oh, and did you know that these habits, like restricting your body, was an issue, or do you think not much of it?
Oh, I was in denial, Jonathan, for so long. I mean, I really thought like, oh, this is the way people do it. And then, of course, with all of us, we're raised in this punch bowl. I call it a diet culture. So I got praised for a lot of my behaviors. Like, oh, you're not eating dessert, or you're eating less of that, or you're going to exercise, twice a day and things like that. So I thought like, oh, this is just me being the health nut. And that's what I was labeled. My parents and my friends used to call me like, you're the health nut. And so it was a role I played and I was very proud of it. Like, this is my role in life. Never realizing how self-destructive it was and how it really started to, just crash my life like over and over again until I got to the point where I knew that I had to really give my all and put in 100% to recovery.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And because you mentioned that people were like just commenting, wow, you look so amazing. Did you say your parents were also like praising your weight?
So, well, they were praising like my determination and
Yeah.
dedication to like working out and sports, and no one really realized the obsessional part of it, so no one knew that when they went to sleep at night, I was still exercising in my room.
Really?
No one knew that, I was starting in, you know, eighth grade. I started other, in terms of the restricting, there was also binging and purging. And I think they weren't aware of those behaviors because I kept them so secret because I was so ashamed about them.
Yeah. Did you ever tell your parents like, well, probably there was a moment when you told your parents, I assume, but like how long did it take for you to, like struggle with anorexia until you told your parents like, okay, I need to let my parents know?
Yeah. So I did not want to tell them, and my mom found my diary. And so
Oh.
she actually read my diary and found out that I was struggling. Because it really was a deep secret and something I didn't want to take away from me. So I kept that to myself. And then I think that, my parents, I did go see a therapist for a very brief period of time because I didn't like the particular therapist. Just basically wasn't the therapist, is that I didn't want to give up the eating disorder. And then I sort of, unfortunately, eating disorders are about dishonesty. I lied to a lot of my loved ones and friends. I'm fine, I'm good. Well, and I kind of hid that behind a mask. You know,
Mm.
I have a really bright smile, people tell me, and I can fool a lot of people. So I was just smiling throughout my life where I was really in tremendous pain inside. I also went through a traumatic experience when I was 13. And I think that that was something that, again, I was really confused about. And it took me until the age of, gosh, probably in my 40s when I actually shared the traumatic experience with my family and my therapist. Yeah.
I think like sharing your experiences, sharing the tough things in life, like there's a saying, I can't remember if it's perfect, like there's saying like trouble shared is a trouble to have.
Mhm. Yes, I love
Yeah.
that. Yes, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think happiness shared is doubleness shared or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful phrase. And I think that is true because I think that especially when we're young, we can't really make sense of something that feels so wrong. We're just like, wait a second, that's not right. But then sometimes we're like, oh, I guess I'm wrong or I'm bad. And we start to like really internalize a lot of these fixed false beliefs or narratives. And it really takes time for us to be able to step back and see it in a different perspective.
Mm.
Um, I think because I didn't feel safe, that the eating disorder provided me with that illusion of safety.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so strong because it protected me for so many years. And that's what I work with my clients. It's not about blaming or shaming. It's about understanding and thanking your eating disorder. Say, hey, you protected me for a long time. And now I'm going to try and figure out maybe some other ways to manage some things I go through in a more healthy or less destructive way. Things
Yeah.
that can be more sustainable and help me meet my short term and long term goals. And I think that that is something that I talk a lot about in my book in terms of like having it as a sense of safety, but knowing that I needed to practice letting it go and finding other ways to manage my anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I mean, like there was a guest recently who came here. She struggled with anorexia. Her name is Hannah Arts, and she also shared. I don't know if it's the same thing with you, but like
Yeah.
she's pretty young. I think 24, if I could remember. But like when she struggled with anorexia back in her teenage years, she said like this sort like little portions is what she's always known. This is portion distortion. So um
Yes.
when people tell her to eat more and more, it seems like a massive amount, and telling to eat regularly, it seems like, how do I eat? She was telling me, so how do I eat regularly? Because when people are telling
Mhm.
you this, and this, add this and add this macronutrient, stuff like that,
Mhm.
scary and it's unfamiliar. And she knows back then that, okay, I'm safe knowing with my portions. I know what to eat. I know the safety, and I don't want to change anything, one of the biggest things she said with anorexia is change. That's because you want to have control. And did you have a similar thing? Like change very scary?
Yes, change was very scary. If it was going to college or going to graduate school or I studied in Ireland. I mean, I did a lot of things in my life where the majority of times when I did have change, my eating disorders would escalate.
Really?
So definitely, big part of my recovery, and I know it's about the food and it's not about the food, but for me, it was really that food exposure in my program to be able to learn, what portions in terms of what I needed for my body, and to be able to expose myself over and over and over again,
Yeah.
where then food like loses its power, and I used to have so many food rules and they were all based on deprivation. Like, you're not allowed to have that. You can't eat that, and all these different things. And then I was able to be like, wait a second, like food freedom is part of freedom in general. And to be able to recognize that all foods fit, and to be able to take away any morality from food. So I thought if I eat something that I deem bad, that means I'm a bad person. And they're
Yeah.
all connected. And then I was able to say, wait a second, a cookie or a salad, there's not bad or good. It's food. And that really, really helped me in terms of learning that. And I'm also a certified intuitive eating counselor. And so I learned the 10 principles of intuitive eating, and that was really, really helpful later in on my recovery.
Yeah, it seemed like it was like a slingshot. Like with all these things you struggled so much that you wanted to be. Well, I don't want to say. Well, I could be wrong, but I could be right. But you wanted to be the best. You wanted to be the person that helps people the best way because you knew how hard it was to struggle.
Yes, absolutely. So I often say I would not wish an eating disorder on my worst night, like my worst enemy. And it was so dark and scary, and I felt so alone. So when I was able to, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm Carolyn Costin eating disorder coach. And so I know that at least I have the lived experience to be able to, and I know we have our own journeys, but the lived experience has helped me, tremendously connect with my clients and kind of say, I've been there or somewhat been there like you, and I'm here to help. And we have to reach out for support. We have to reach out to people instead of our eating disorder. So I definitely think like my life has become full circle, which is really exciting, that I'm able to work in a passion and know that, I've been through really a lot of darkness to hopefully help people find the light more quickly than I did.
Yeah, I mean, coming from that, if this is going to be a big question, uh,
Mhm.
if there's three things, are there what three things would you want clinicians to know about clinicians who haven't struggled with eating disorders? What would you want? What are the three things you want clinicians to know about eating disorders? And what are the three things people who've never struggled with eating disorders would you wish they would know?
Okay. First off, I think they're two different questions, but I think in
Yeah.
terms of what clinicians I'd like them to know is that we cannot tell by looking at someone if they have an eating disorder.
Mm,
Um, and that is a stereotype that I think we're slowly breaking down. That you can be in a smaller body and a larger body and still be diagnosed with anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. And I think that's really important because unfortunately, the DSM puts such an emphasis on weight, and I really want to take it away from that. It's really about how they have found safety in maladaptive behaviors, and it's about helping them with that. I think that also I would teach clinicians that I come from the philosophy that we are born with our authentic, healthy core self. And then over time, this eating disorder self starts to build and build. And so part of recovery is being able to heal our eating disorder self by strengthening our healthy core self. So there's like this constant like reframe or dialoguing with our like deep self. Like when we were born, we were not thinking about restricting. We were like, where's the milk? Like I want milk and I'm going to cry until I get it until I'm satisfied. And to get back to that place, I think also it's really important to with clinicians, focus on what you're recovering to. So we know what we're recovering from, all the stuff, but then like, what are we recovering to? And for me, one of the reasons I went into treatment in my middle age was because I had 2 little nephews at the time. And I had a competitor because I wanted to be the best aunt possible. So I have to say I am. I really am. But I was like, wait a second, I need to be alive to be the best aunt, to take my nephews on sleepovers and trips and give them money and gifts and all this great stuff. So I knew I had to get myself right. And so for me, that was my initial motivation. And then I recovered to myself. But for me, it was something like, that's what I'm recovering to. And it kept me motivated.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Sometimes like, just a quick note, just to butt you in, just a little thought in my mind. That's a really insightful actually, because we often think like if you're struggling from an eating disorder, it's like you're having 2 minds, like you, and then this eating disorder thoughts like chattering away and everything. But it seems like if you're doing it for yourself, it's just like one bit of motivator. But if you're doing it for other people, like I want to do this to like for my partner, for my loved one, so I can look forward to the future, stuff like that. It's another strengthening motivator, extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation.
Absolutely, both of those. Sure. So that's what I would want clinicians to know. I think when I think about, what people don't know, I think it's that, it doesn't help for someone to say just eat. Because granted, I know we need food exposure, but it's not as simple as that. Like eating disorders are brain disorders and they're multifaceted mental illnesses. So I think, unfortunately, people don't understand what they are. And I think that I would want people to understand that it's a brain disorder and it deserves support and people need help with recovery. And I would also say that, what I would also tell people similarly, that you can't tell from someone if they have an eating disorder. And also I would tell people to not comment on people's bodies. Like, just don't do it. I listened to someone and she said, she uses the expression MYOB, mind your own body. And I'm like, I love that. Like, don't talk about my body weight or shape. There's so many more interesting things about me. And it can only be hurtful. And so, or reinforce something that's not particularly helpful. So I would tell people as well, like, change the subject, talk about other more interesting things. And those are some of the things I share with people who are not clinicians.
Wow, MYOB.
Yes, it's so great. I love it. I stole it from her, and I use it now. Like, that's great.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what do you think about like those nutrition influencers? Well, they don't have to be nutrition influencers. Those people are Instagram, TikTok, people who are just saying, like you always have these coaches that pop up in your feed, probably personal trainers that say like, oh, if you're not working hard enough, then you don't want it hard enough. You're lazy, you just get off your couch and everything. What do you think about that coming from someone who recovered from anorexia?
I think that for me personally, that doesn't work because I think part of my recovery was being gentle and compassionate with myself and actually recognizing that rest is part of recovery. So part of people, not with all, but some people with, eating disorders, I had a very perfectionistic personality. I was very determined. I wanted to be the best. And then I was just like, wait a second, like, let's just sit with the here and now and let's take a break. What? A break? Like, that was foreign to me. I'd be like, I'd have to be moving. So I was always running away from something.
By the way, just a quick break from the podcast to let you know of my free hunger regulation webinar series, which is in the link in the description of this podcast. There's also an ebook version if you're more of a reader than a watcher. This is the perfect resource I wish I had when I struggled with binge eating years ago, which is used to guide you from everything you need to know, from why we binge, what are the binge triggers, and the eating pattern to stop binge eating. Because when we've been struggling with binge eating for so long, you and your body lose touch of what normal hunger and normal fullness is. You're constantly on feast or famine mode. So head to the link in the description of this podcast for the free hunger regulation resources to have a clear game plan to tackle binge eating for good. Anyway, let's get straight back to the episode.
So part of like recovery was just being and sitting and recognizing that also, and I'm actually writing a chapter in a new book coming up about joyful movement, that for me, it was really finding what movements bring me joy. For me, it's going down to the park and having my dog run sprints at the park, and like that was fun. I find joy in that instead of the, like I have to, or should go there, or I should do this. And it wasn't enjoyable. It was more of like a punishment. And for me, movement right now is something that it's to move my body, to strengthen it, to make it flexible, but also to find joy.
Yeah, you're finding so much like it seems like you turned everything around into some form of like self-care rather than coming from guilt.
Yes. I was so full of I'm Irish, so we always like pretend like, I always say like Irish guilt, but I was full most of the things I would say or do, I had guilt. I would make a decision, it was the wrong decision. I did this, that was wrong. This is going to turn out bad. And so for part of my recovery, and I truly believe it's about creating an identity away from the eating disorder, for me, I had to really start to build my intuition. And really, there's one of my chapters that I start with. The first thing I started to do is making a decision. And I was like, yes, making a decision. Do I want to wear blue or white? Like very, very simple decisions, because I was always like, it was a catastrophe in my head. And I always thought something bad was going to happen. And so it's practicing making decisions. And even if it maybe be the wrong decision, that's okay, because we learned from that experience. And to build that sense of self, which was really taken away from the anorexia.
Yeah. When you're helping people, say clients struggling with anorexia, what are the things that you find really helpful when they present to you? Like what kind of coping skills or like some tips you normally give to them?
Yeah, I think that, so I give them a lot of different tips. I mean, one of the things I do with some of my clients is that I do snack exposure with them. So like in session, they might bring a fear food or something that's difficult for them, and we both eat it together, and we kind of process the feelings before and then eat together and then process the feelings afterwards. I think that's really helpful. Also with my clients, we work a lot about reaching out to people instead of the eating disorder. So for me, I'm the type of therapist and coach that I want my clients to reach out if they're having an urge. Because right then and there, if you're able to reach out to someone when you have an urge, even if you act on the urge, you're tapping into your healthy self. And you're saying, I might need some support. That's like the great first step. So I often will have a homework assignment to say, okay, 3 times this week, I want you to reach out to me when you have an urge to restrict a meal, and that's a tool that really helps them to lean on support and then be able to recognize that they do have the ability to pause. When I was so sick, I thought I had a thought and then an act. It was like simultaneous. And then I'm like, I can have a thought, first of all, not act on it, sit with it and let it go. Like, so to build that, sense of self that you're able to do that is really, really powerful. I also do a lot of journaling. I think that journaling is really, really helpful. So I do give a lot of journaling prompts. I just had a session with someone and she said, I just don't want to be seen. And I said, wow, that's so powerful. Why don't you do a little bit of writing on that? Let's get that out, get that on paper and share it. And talk about it. So those are some of the things, as well as I, really teach about the 2 parts of ourself. I also teach a little bit about creating an identity away from the eating disorder and being able to identify, what is creating, motivation, in us. And also, I also normalize the ambivalence, because that's part of the disorder as well. So one of my clients the other day said, I'm scared if I don't have a perfect recovery, you won't see me. And I said, oh my gosh, like, first of all, I do not have a perfect recovery because it doesn't exist. I said, it's not linear. It's like you're on this merry-go-round. And so I'm here to be on that merry-go-round with you. And we're going to let go of perfectionism and be in the here and now and really work together.
Yeah, eating disorder, or actually our relationship with food is a spectrum.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
never like perfect. You just like you hit the bar of perfect eating, quote unquote, whatever that is, and then you
Mhm.
just stay there forever.
Yes, every day is different. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for some of people, it is about letting go of that perfectionistic type of, thinking. And then what we do is really when we're like looking for perfection, we're sort of kind of avoiding things because we're just saying like, well, it has to be this or nothing. And it's like, okay, let's be gentle with ourselves and be able to be kind of connecting with ourselves along the way and noticing that we learn. When we fall down, we learn. I mean, really, I believe that. I mean, I've learned so much from my eating disorder that I really thank it. I mean, yes, it was terrible, but it also was a beautiful opportunity for me to grow into the person I am today.
Yeah. Going back to the perfectionism, first of all,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and I'm like really, really proud of you to
Thank you so
where you
much.
are at the moment. But like
Mhm.
going back to the perfectionism, because you mentioned at the start,
Mhm.
OCD was kind of like contributing to your anorexic habits. How did you get from where you were to where
Mhm.
you are right now? Like, what's that quote unquote secret?
That's a great idea. I mean, I wish I had it. If I did, I'd bottle it up and sell it. But really, for me, you know, learning being mindful of my thoughts was really important because what I would do is that I would start to feel some type of maybe uncomfortable feeling and immediately say, I can't deal with this. So I would do something or anything to get rid of that feeling, that numbness. And so if that was eating disorder, if that was compulsive exercise, if that was, compulsive spending or shopping. And what I've realized now is that, okay, like I'm able to, first of all, feel a feeling. It's not going to kill me. It's temporary. It comes and goes. I can surf the wave. I'm a DBT therapist as well. So I really believe in surfing the waves
Yeah.
and being able to recognize is that we're going to have so many thousands of thoughts each day. So we can be aware of them like an observer, stand back, but not have to grab onto them and attach to them. We can practice letting them go. So I can sit here and say, oh, I really want to go to the mall and buy this thing right now. And I'll be like, okay. Then I let it go. Then I don't go to the mall and buy the dress because it's really not that important. you know?
Yeah.
So it's really for me, mindfulness has been a key coping strategy in dealing with my thoughts and my feelings and helping with OCD, definitely. And then I did a lot of exposure therapy. I mean, I would purposely like mess up the magazines on the cocktail table and sit with it, being like, it's not, okay, what's going to happen? Nothing. Like I can do this. And it's like exposing yourself a little bit at a time. I still do it today with dishes. Dishes are in the sink. I leave them in the sink.
Oh yeah, well, funny thing actually yes about that. Because yesterday, I went to like this event and I was like, oh, like the dishes are just piling up. Like
Mhm.
it's not like there's not enough room in the sink. It's just like laying on the side now. And then I was kind of stressing because I was like, oh, I don't have the mental and physical energy for it today. And I was just like, huh, if I just sit with this, it's not the end of the world. Like it's not Mm, the whole house isn't going to turn into a swamp or something overnight. I can get it done tomorrow or something. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. How freeing is that?
Yeah.
To you have that ability. Definitely.
I
Mhm.
mean, we have the, it was really, really, really freeing, strangely. But not that I'm going
Mhm.
to leave it unwashed for like a week or something.
Exactly. I wouldn't know if I could do that either. But it's really freeing to be like, oh, wait. Oh, you know what? It's late and I'm getting a little tired and it's time for a meal. So I'm going to stop and eat and save this project for tomorrow. Just that because what we're able to do is we find a little bit more balance in our lives. And I think life is a balancing act and to really be identified. And I think when I was sick with my eating disorder, I was so consumed by the eating disorder that I couldn't focus on anything else. And so for me, just being able to recognize like, oh, I can create this more brain space with every kind of step of recovery I make. and I can focus on other things in my life. And that's beautiful.
That's really powerful.
Mhm.
Mindfulness and serving the urge and that space between the thought and the action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. I often tell my clients, like, when I learned that, like, which I already knew, but like when I relearned it, like in treatment, I was like mind blown. Like, what? Like, I thought if I had a thought and I had to act on it. There was like no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm like, no, wow, we can just be mindful. We can observe it. We can notice. We can notice our body and our sensations without acting.
Yeah. Well, probably that's the thing, mindfulness, I guess. If you could bottle it up, then the
Yeah,
silence.
mindfulness is a big one. So I would say, and I also think part of the mindfulness is the non-judgmental stance. So I think that for me, I had severe judgment against myself and judgment against other people because I thought there was only this one way to be. And so noticing my judgment of myself and others really, really helped me to build perspective, to build a sense of like diversity and different perspectives and be able to recognize that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have and to really let go of like those stereotypes or what is right and what is wrong because we all have a different journey.
Yeah.
And that's really helped me build compassion for myself and other people. So the judgment piece is really key because when I notice I'm judging something in someone else, it's about me. Like, I'm like, what's going on with me? And so it's really about like, okay, I'm judging this situation and I'm evaluating it. So my emotion mind is going up.
Mm.
Okay, let me step back and simply observe and describe without judgment. Let's stick to the facts. And then we're able to take the emotion out of it. And we're able to most likely kind of come from a wise mind place and make effective decisions for the most part in our life.
Oh, that's really powerful, Meredith.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I guess if people wanted to work with you, like where can they find you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So you can visit my coaching website at recoveryfromanorexia.com. You can go to my private practice therapist website at meredithobrienlcsw.com. And then I have my Instagram, which is at ed_recovery_mo. And my Facebook is at edrecoverymo.
Wow.
So those are the different ways people can get in touch with me. And I also, on my Recovery from Anorexia website, I have a blog and I write blogs every month. Those are ways people can get in touch with me. I have my email and my phone number. You know, people are able to reach out to me in whenever, any way possible that I can help them with resources or if they need to have a therapist or a coach.
I have a question. Like you mentioned earlier
Yes.
that you're when you're supporting people and they have a thought they would want to act upon, so they just call you. Does your phone keep on ringing nonstop,
Yeah.
or do you have
It's
like
a
a
great question. People always ask that. That's a great question. I would say, I see about 25 to 30 clients a week. And I would say that, usually there's a few people who reach out to me more, and then there's some people who don't reach out at all. So
Yeah.
I think it's really but I think that also I tell my clients, it's not a session, right? It's me then saying, use this skill and then get back to me. So it's like I'm coaching them in building their toolbox. So eventually, hopefully, they can do that on their own.
Wow, that's a really good idea. Not to be dependent. That's what I thought at first. I was like, oh,
Yes. I mean, I think exactly. And I think it's a stage in recovery because then we build the sense of self that we're like, oh, okay, I could think I could do this on my own today, or maybe, and then I say, reach out to me when you did something well. So reach out to me and say, hey, I did this really well today. Don't wait until next week. Tell me right now. That's awesome. Let's celebrate that.
that's amazing. Oh, and
Yeah.
you hold your hand. I'll hold their hands during recovery.
Yeah, I try. I try.
So that's really good. Well, Meredith, first of all, thank you so much for coming along to the podcast. You're just like
Of
a wealth of
course.
knowledge, and especially a wealth of knowledge in terms of you, like, struggling with anorexia for many years yourself. And now you've come out of it. You've transferred all of that into your book. And I forgot to ask, where can people find your book?
Yes, they can find my book, Opening the Door, My Journey Through Anorexia to Full Recovery on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, anywhere books are sold. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. But that's really, yeah, you can get it. And I'd be honored for you to read my book or give it to someone who's struggling, or even to a family member who has someone struggling in their life with an eating disorder, so they can learn more about it.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
sometimes nice to know, because it's sometimes good to hear about, like, you hear about, like, some pages on Instagram, for example, people recovering from anorexia,
Mhm.
but not to be mean, but like anorexia sometimes shows it doesn't show the deepest, most
Yeah.
vulnerable bits. Although there's some people share some vulnerable bits, we can't see like everything. But like, as you said, like yours is a memoir, if you said that right, and it's
Yes.
be really, really vulnerable, and from start to the end, like it has everything in it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I sometimes couldn't believe what I did right. Like, I was so vulnerable, but it really was part of my healing in general. And I really wanted people to really understand. And I think I did a pretty good job of it, and I'm really proud of it. But also, it comes down to, like, if I can help someone else, and a lot of people have read my book and saying, oh my gosh, like, you feel the way I feel, or I felt the way you felt, or you can do it, I can do it. And like, all of that is just, really helpful, because we do need mentors and people we look up to be able to help us on this really hard journey of recovery.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Yeah.
so amazing. And what final question? I'm always asking questions. But
Sure.
like, yeah, what was that trigger for you to make that book? Was there a spark where it's like, okay, I need to put everything down in a book or anything?
That's a great idea. Great question. I mean, so I actually went to a writing studio in my town when I was trying to create hobbies away from my eating disorder, and one of them was writing. And so I went to a memoir writing class, and it just sparked this idea, like, I'm going to write about my life.
What a great
And I love to write. I loved writing in high school and college and grad school. And I was like, I think I want to share this with the world. So I think it was just like the being able to be in a belonging sense of writers, and being able to kind of show my work and get some feedback. And then I just kind of went into my office, and every night wrote and wrote, and was able to, complete my book.
it,
So
yeah, it just all pieces together.
it does. There's so, I mean, even like, I hope you read the book, because it really, there's like so many different things that like just connect with one another. It's sort of amazing.
Wow, that's
Um, my
yeah.
life and how it's become full circle. That was the other name I was going to name it, Full Circle. But no, with Opening the Door, just because I think it was so meaningful for me, that opening the door means so much, in terms of, opening my door to my life.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah.
No, that's
Mhm.
amazing, Meredith. Well,
Yes.
there's a little culture that I do in this podcast where the previous guest would ask a
Mhm.
question to you, the current guest, and then later
Oh,
on,
cool.
yeah, and then later on you would ask the next question. So the previous guest asked, who's Alexa? She's gut health specialist, dietitian specializing in SIBO, small
Okay.
intestinal bowel overgrowth. She
Yes.
wanted to ask you, how do you manage your stress levels?
Such a good question. I manage my stress levels by cuddling with my dog every morning and every night. So that is definitely one thing. I also go to Pilates, which I really enjoy because it's really soft and stretchy on my body, and that's really helpful. And also, I read almost every day. So reading is my happy place. Me and a cup of coffee and a book, and I'm happy. And so I do spend at least some days, some time each day reading. So I would say those are, my dog, some joyful movement, and reading are some ways I manage my stress.
Yeah. What are you reading right now?
That's a great question. So I actually just finished. I just read Daisy Joan and the Six, which was really good. If you've
Okay.
heard of that. I just finished Spare by Prince Harry.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was really interesting. And I just finished it. So I'm going to start a new book today. And I have a lot of books. I do have a little obsession with books. So I have a lot of books to choose from. So I have to go downstairs and into my library and say what's next. I'm very excited.
Have you seen the documentary of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? The
I
Netflix.
did. I did. Yes. I liked it a lot. I thought it was interesting. And I loved just his point of view and just understanding through his eyes, like what it was like to be like the spare prince. I mean, it's so interesting why he named it spare, because he was second in line and now he's like fifth in line, or now he's not in line, you know?
Yeah,
So it's about how differently they were brought up, and also about his relationship with paparazzi and his mother and things like that. So we sometimes forget that people, even though they're royalty, are people. And,
yeah.
I love memoirs, obviously why I wrote one, but I really like to know about other people's lives. So, there's definitely a memoir downstairs. I'm just trying to figure out what it is so I can start to read it. So a lot of good books left, and I'm very excited to
Yeah.
read.
On a side note, did you know Prince Harry's mum? She struggled with bulimia. Princess
Yeah.
Diana.
Yes, I do know that. Yes, I forget when that came out or when I was privy to it, but I was really proud of her that she was so open about that when she was alive. And say like, listen, like there's so much stress and pressure, and that she found that outlet, and but I think that she was really in recovery and really trying hard, and really proud of her that she put it out there in the open and was honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Meredith, so that's the time for the podcast, and I'm extremely grateful. And I'm sure we can talk about many, many more things, and especially about
Yeah.
your. But if, like, just as people are listening here, like, if you want to find out more about Meredith, I'm gonna link her links in the description of the podcast, as well as her books, in the description of the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much, Meredith. And one more thing before I forget, I almost forgot. What's the question you would like to ask for the next guest?
Okay, I got so many are floating around in my head. I would say, what are you most proud of?
Oh, that's a good one.
I think that's the question I would ask to the next speaker. And Jonathan, it was so nice to be here. And I'm so proud of you that you did this podcast and share information with the world. And I'm really happy we were able to connect, and hopefully we can continue connecting as we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Jonathan. Have a great day.
Struggling with binge eating? Gain access to my exclusive self-paced binge eating freedom course found in the link in the description of this podcast. My course is everything I wish I knew when I struggled with binge eating, but it's all wrapped up into one easy to understand platform. You'll finally learn how to put an end to binge eating and put an end to food dictating everything you do, controlling your life. Access it now in the link in the description of this podcast.